Okay, so think about a notebook you really liked, one that felt, good in your hands. What made it stand out? It wasn't just the paper inside,
Yeah.
right? A lot of that first impression, that feel, it often comes down to the cover. So today we're going to dig into something that sounds kind of simple, the paperweight for notebook covers.
Yeah.
But it actually makes a huge difference to the quality, the perception, everything.
It absolutely does. And, your first thought might be, well, thicker is always better, right?
Hmm.
More substantial. But our experience working with all sorts of clients, I mean, from tiny stationery brands right up to huge corporations, it's shown us it's a lot more nuanced than that. Weight isn't the only thing that matters.
Exactly. So when people ask us, hey, what's the perfect paperweight for my cover? There's never just one number. So in this deep dive, we're really going to unpack what GSM, that's grams per square meter, actually means for a cover, and explore why just picking the heaviest option might actually be the wrong call for your specific needs. Our goal here is simple: clarity. Give you the insights to confidently choose the right weight, whether it's for, I don't know, your personal project or a massive order for your business. Let's cut through that confusion.
Okay, let's get right into it then. GSM. So basically, it stands for grams per square meter. It's just a measure of how much a square meter of that paper weighs. And yeah, generally, a higher GSM number means heavier, thicker paper. That part's true. But here's the thing. Weight is only one piece of the puzzle. You also have to think about stuff like how stiff is it? How well does it fold? How does it look? How does it take ink or, special finishes?
That's a really good point. It's not just about the heft. So maybe an example would help illustrate that heavier isn't always a better idea.
Sure. Okay, think about a standard spiral notebook, the kind you grab for notes, right? The cover might be, say, 250 GSM coated paper. It feels decent, protects the pages, it's flexible, pretty light. Now picture a really fancy hardcover planner, a luxury item. The core of that cover, the rigid board inside that could be super dense, maybe 1200 GSM or gray board, feels really solid. But the paper wrapped around it, the pretty printed part, that might only be like 157 GSM or art paper, much lighter.
Ah, I see. So the actual printed surface is lighter, but the structure underneath is heavy.
Exactly. And what's cool is how the use case dictates those choices. The spiral notebook needs to bend easily. The planner needs to feel robust, lie flat, look premium. So the GSM, it's tailored. One isn't just better overall, it depends on the job it needs to do.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So for listeners thinking about their own projects now, what are some common paperweights they'll encounter for covers? Can we create a quick mental checklist?
Yeah, definitely. Let's run through some popular ones. So, art paper or coated paper, usually somewhere between 200 and 300 RISM. This is great for soft covers if you want really vibrant colors. And it works well if you're planning on adding things like glossy or matte lamination or maybe some foil stamping or spot UV highlights.
Okay, so good for colorful designs and finishes. What else?
Then there's craft paper, also often in that 250 to 300 GSM range, that gives you that really nice, natural, sort of rustic or eco-friendly look you see a lot with brands focused on sustainability, right? Gives a totally different vibe.
Yeah, I like that craft paper feel. It's very tactile. What if you want something maybe plainer or writable?
Good question. For covers, you might actually want to write on for labeling or notes, uncoated offset card is a good bet. Usually 250 to 350 GSM. It's got more of a matte, slightly textured surface that takes ink well. And if you want a soft cover that feels kind of special, maybe a bit boutique. Textured cardstock, again in that 350 GSM range, offers loads of different tactile finishes. It adds that little something extra just through touch.
Interesting. So those cover the main soft cover options.
Yeah.
What about when you need real structure, like serious rigidity?
Right, that's where Grayboard comes in. This is the real backbone for hardcover notebooks. Think planners, nice journals, gift books. It can range from maybe 800 GSM, which is already quite firm, all the way up to 1500 GSM, which is super stiff, rock solid. But remember, that's the core. The printed paper that wraps around the gray board is usually lighter, typically 120 to 200 GSM, and that wrap is where your design goes. It could be coated paper for sharp printing, or maybe a linen textured paper for a classic feel, or other specialty stuff.
Got it. So it's layers. Grayboard for strength, wrap for the looks. Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into specific notebook types then. How does this apply to, say, standard softcover notebooks, perfect bound or stitched?
Right. For those soft covers, that 200 to 300 grants range is generally your target zone. Now, if you're really focused on budget, maybe for internal office use or big giveaway batches sticking to the lower end, like 200 to 250 grants works well. It does the job, protects the pages, but keeps costs and weight down. Think like conference freebies.
Practical, cost-effective. Got it. But what if you want that softcover to feel a bit nicer, more premium?
Then you definitely want to step it up. Moving into the 250 to 300 grancism range makes a noticeable difference. It just feels sturdier in the hand, more durable. It holds up better to being carried around. And importantly, it gives you a better base. If you want to add those nicer finishes we talked about, laminations, spot UV, foil, they just look and feel better on a slightly heavier stock.
Ah, okay, so the weight impacts the finish quality too. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned a pro tip for soft covers.
Yeah. Consider using what's called C1S card. That means it's coated on one side. So you get that nice, smooth, perhaps glossy coated surface on the outside for your printing. But the inside of the cover is left uncoated and matte, which is actually pretty handy if you want a space to write a name or instructions or just anything, really. Best of both worlds sometimes.
That is clever.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. What about spiral-bound notebooks? They always seem to take a beating.
They really do. All that flipping and bending. Durability is absolutely key there. So for spiral covers, we generally recommend sticking within that 250 to 300 GRism range. Coated paper or craft paper works well. And here's a big tip. Seriously consider adding a laminated finish, especially if they're for schools or training sessions where people carry them about or field work. That lamination adds crucial protection against spills, scuffs, moisture. Just makes them last longer.
Right, that makes total sense. Focus on toughness for spirals. Does the size matter much here? Like A4 versus A5?
It does, yeah. For a larger A4 spiral leaning towards 300 GRism is probably better. It helps prevent the cover from feeling too floppy or flimsy because of the larger surface area. For smaller sizes like A5 or pocket notebooks, 250 GRism is often perfectly fine. It keeps the weight down a bit while still being sturdy enough. It's about that balance.
Okay, good distinction. Now let's talk about the fancier end, hardcover, case-bound notebooks. What's the deal with paperweight there?
Right, so hardcovers, as we touched on, have that two-part thing going on. You've got the core, the stiff part, which is gray board, usually somewhere between, say, 630 GSM on the lower end, up to maybe 1,500 GSM for really chunky books. And the exact thickness of that gray board often depends on the notebook's final size. A bigger notebook generally needs a thicker board to feel proportionally sturdy.
So the bigger the book, the stronger the core needs to be.
Pretty much, yeah. And then you've got the wrap. That's the printed sheet that goes over the gray board. That's typically lighter, maybe 120 to 200 GRism. Often it's coated art paper because it prints beautifully. But you can use specialty papers too, linen texture, leatherette, things like that for a really premium feel. This wrap gets printed, often laminated or coated for protection, and then carefully glued onto the gray board.
And that combination creates that classic hardcover feel.
Exactly. You know, for those really high-end brands, you often see those textured wraps, linen, maybe a soft touch finish. It adds a lot to the perceived value. A really common and very effective combo for, say, a nice planner or an executive gift notebook. It might be something like a 1200 GSM gray board core, paired with a 157 GSM coated paper wrap, finished with a nice matte lamination that gives you good weight, great durability, and a really sophisticated look.
Yeah, that sounds like a notebook you definitely want to use. Okay, so stepping back a bit from just the GSM number, what other big factors should people be thinking about?
Well, durability is a huge one, obviously. We've kind of touched on it, but it's worth stressing. If these notebooks are going to get heavy use, thrown in bags, handled a lot in shops, you really need to prioritize a tougher, heavier cover stock. Strength becomes more important than maybe a softer feel in those cases.
Right. Function over form sometimes. What else?
The finish you want to apply is critical. We mentioned foil stamping, debossing.
Where the design is pressed in?
Yeah, exactly. Or even just a thick, luxurious feeling lamination like soft touch. These processes involve heat or pressure or both. A sturdier paper, maybe 300 GRism rather than 250 GRism, will just handle that better. You get a cleaner result, it holds detail better. A lighter stock might, struggle a bit or not look as crisp.
Okay, so match the paper strength to the planned embellishments. Good tip. And I imagine brand perception plays a role too.
Oh, massively. The physical weight of the cover, it sends an immediate signal about quality and value. It's subconscious almost. A heavier paper just feels more premium, there's no getting around it. So while a 200 GSM cover might be totally fine for a cheap promotional handout, if you're creating a notebook as a client gift or something to sell at a higher price point, investing in a heavier, more substantial cover really elevates that perception. Think about the difference when you pick up a freebie versus a journal you paid good money for.
Yeah, that tactile feedback is instant. And, okay, let's get practical. What about cost and shipping? Weight must impact that.
Absolutely. It's simple math, really. Higher GFM means more paper material per notebook. If you're making thousands or tens of thousands, even a jump of, say, 50 GSM on the cover adds up. It increases your material costs. And crucially, it increases the overall weight of your shipment, which means higher freight costs. And yeah, a bigger carbon footprint too, if that's a concern. So you always have to balance the ideal design and feel with the realities of your budget and logistics, especially on large runs.
Right, it's a balancing act. Quality, message, budget, logistics. Okay, let's make this super concrete. Can we run through some common business scenarios and suggest typical paperweights?
Sure, let's try a few. Okay, scenario one. Internal notebooks, maybe training manuals, function first for that. 200 to 250 GSM uncoated or maybe a light coated paper. Usually does the trick, keeps costs down.
Okay, scenario 2. Trade show giveaways. Need to look decent, but maybe not break the bank.
Right. For that, maybe a 250 GSM art paper, perhaps with a simple matte lamination. Gives it a professional look, bit of durability, still reasonably cost-effective.
Good middle ground. What about notebooks branded for clients? You want to impress a bit more?
Yeah, there you might step up. Consider a 300 GSM craft paper for that eco-natural feel, or maybe a textured stock, something that feels a bit more special, more tactile.
Nice touch. Spiral notebooks for schools or offices, A4 size. Need to be tough.
Definitely lean towards 300 GSM is there, either coated both sides, C2S or craft.
Oh, yeah.
And strongly recommend lamination for protection, as we said.
Okay. How about a high-end hardcover planner? Maybe with a debossed logo.
That combo we mentioned earlier is great for this. Around 1200 GSM gray board inside with maybe 157 GSM wrap could be coated with matte lamination or perhaps a textured specialty paper wrap. Really solid premium feel.
Perfect. And one more, an eco-friendly notebook line for retail.
For that, a good FSC certified craft paper, probably in the 280 to 300 GSM range, looks the part, feels substantial enough for retail, aligns with the eco message.
That's super helpful mapping weights to uses like that. Now, on the flip side, are there common mistakes people make with cover weight? Things to avoid?
Oh yeah, definitely. A big one is underestimating stiffness, especially on larger formats like A4. Using, say, a 200 GSM cover on an A4 softcover notebook, it just feels flimsy, cheapens the whole thing, and it'll wear out fast. Not a good look.
Right. Don't go too thin on big books. What else?
Another issue is going wild with embellishments, foil, debossing, heavy UV, without making sure the paper can actually handle it well. Like we said, lighter stocks might buckle or not take the heat or pressure properly. You need a solid foundation for fancy finishes.
So don't overload a weak base.
Exactly. And one more practical thing, forgetting about writability. A super high gloss coated cover looks slick, prints sharp images, but it's awful to write on if someone needs to label it or jot a note on the cover itself. Texture matters for usability sometimes.
Good point. Practicality wins. So how can listeners best avoid these mistakes and feel confident in their choice?
Honestly, the single best thing you can do is get samples. Physical mock-ups. Ask your manufacturer for pre-production samples using the actual paper stocks you're considering. Hold them. Feel them. See how stiff the cover feels with the binding. Fold it. Handle it like it would be used. And critically, try to get samples printed with your actual artwork, or at least similar colors. See how the ink looks, how the lamination feels on that specific paper. Don't just rely on a digital proof. You need to experience it physically. Getting hands-on is key.
Feeling is believing, basically.
It really is in this case.
Okay, well, as we start to wrap up this deep dive, it's definitely clear that choosing notebook cover paperweight is, well, it's more involved than just picking a number off a chart.
It really is. There's no single right answer, no magic GSM that works for everything. The best choice, the ideal choice, is always going to depend on a whole mix of things unique to your project. You know, the notebook size, the binding style, how it's going to be used, who it's for, the brand image you want to project, your budget, even shipping. It all plays a part.
So the main takeaway here seems to be the best paperweight is the one that fits your specific purpose and goals. We've covered a lot, thinking about durability, how finishes work with the paper, brand signals, and those unavoidable cost factors.
Yeah, and hopefully listeners feel a bit more equipped now to weigh up all those different elements when they're making their decision.
Absolutely. And maybe here's a final thought to leave everyone with. Beyond all the specs, the GSMs, the technical details, think about the unspoken message. What does the actual feel and weight of your notebook cover communicate? Silently. What does it say about the quality you offer, the care you took, the attention to detail, that subtle tactile experience? It really could say a lot, something worth mulling over as you choose.